Episode 5 of the Dads and Angels podcast is a special episode. I'm turning over creative freedom over to Braden Galyen, a great friend of mine, and one of the guests from one of our previous episodes. I did this in order to be able to tell Garrett's story from the perspective of guest rather than the host of the show. So without further ado, I give you episode 5.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Dads and Angels podcast. My name is Braden Galyen. I'll be your host tonight. You might recognize me from episode 3. And tonight I will be interviewing the regular host, Kyle Mork. How are you doing tonight, Kyle?
Doing great, man, and thanks for stepping in for me so we could kind of get Garrett's story told here tonight.
Hey man, no problem. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me on again, and to let you know that it's an honor to be part of this episode.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure, and us becoming friends over this whole thing. I couldn't think of a more perfect person to get up on here and do this thing with me.
All right, Kyle. Well, let's get started, man. Go ahead and tell us your story, man.
Yeah, it's a long one. It started in October of. What was it now? 2016. We had gotten back from our trip to Italy, and Amanda and I, we were living in the South Loop of Chicago at the time. And I remember sitting at dinner and we were talking about like kind of where we were going to go. You know, we did our international trip. We did a whole lot of traveling that whole previous year through the U.S. And we just kind of wanted to know, like, you know, where we saw each other kind of going with our life. And we're like, well, you know, now it seems kind of like poised, like maybe we should try and start having a kid. So fast forward to, I think it was January of 2017. We were like, all of a sudden, like, she comes up to me after work and she's like, she's got the little pregnancy stick, and she goes, I think I'm pregnant. And I was like, holy shit, like that happened fast, and I couldn't have been happier. So that night we actually, we went to dinner, and we'd always stop at Jason's Deli on our way home from work. And at this time, you know, like I said, we live in the South Loop, so we only lived about 3 miles away from work. So we stopped at Jason's Deli again, and Amanda's going to kill me when she finds out I told this over the podcast. But she had another pregnancy test. She's like, I just want to confirm. And so she ran into the bathroom at Jason's Deli, checked the pregnancy test again, and sure enough, it was positive again. And I remember she came out, she showed me the positive test, and I just got up and I was speechless, man. So I just grabbed my wife, I grabbed Amanda, and I just held on to her, and I teared up. I can be a pretty emotional guy, so I teared up. I honestly didn't have many words, but I couldn't wait to tell people at that point. So we did the we're pregnant thing after a little while. Like we held the secret in as long as we could, told our family, told our friends, told people at work. We did all the the baby showers and everything. And then, we were starting to look for houses, and, sorry, I got a little choked up there for a second thinking about all that stuff, but we started doing the stuff that you're supposed to do. You know, you're supposed to, you trade in the Bachelor Mobile. At that point in time was I had a Jeep Wrangler, 4-door Jeep Wrangler. It was my car I bought out of pharmacy school. So it was like, that was my first thing that I had bought. We traded that in and got the, Jeep Grand Cherokee, we called it the Dad Mobile, or we called it the Tank too. The thing is just awesome. And, something that we made sure, a kid's seat could fit in the back. So then the next step was trying to figure out, do we want to live in the city or do we want to move out to the suburbs? And, we went round and round. We actually had an offer on one house, and we ended up backing out of that. Luckily enough, everyone was understanding with that. And then we found just the perfect house. It's this gingerbread house in Riverside, Illinois. And when we saw the house, we we're like, this is perfect. It's a nice, small little house, perfect starter home for our starter family. And, we got everything moved in. We moved in Labor Day of 2017, and, it was just after I had finished the triathlon, and, everything just seemed to kind of be going, it was going as planned, everything was going good. We had some, up and down stuff when we were moving in. Like, we bought a couch that didn't fit into our basement. And we thought that was the biggest deal at the time. Like, we thought, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world. But we handled it. We got that figured out. And I remember we were sitting down in the basement, and this was around October 3rd. And it was after work. We were sitting downstairs watching TV on this giant couch we finally got to fit in the basement. And my wife was like, Garrett's kicking a lot. And I was like, well, it's, we just kind of chalked up to, it's got to be coming close. Like, this has got to be it.
Yeah, it's almost time. Y'all are, right there in that home stretch.
It was the day before. It was the day before our due date. So we're like, oh, well, that's got to be normal, right? He's just kicking like crazy. He's ready to come out. He's ready to meet his dad. He's ready to meet his mom. Ready to see his new house, And the next day, we went out and, I'm sorry, that was October 2nd. So October 3rd, the next day, we're laying on the couch again, same spot. And Amanda's like, I'm really feeling a lot of contractions, but I'm not feeling a lot of movement. And, this might be a part where I may have to take a pause a little bit at times, but, and I'm like, okay, the movement thing is probably nothing. He's probably, just getting ready. He's probably going to come out pretty soon. So, let's go to the hospital and see what's going on. And, Amanda hopped in the shower. She, made sure that, she was ready to go. I remember, and this seems so silly now, but at the same time, I kind of remember, getting dressed and being like, putting a shirt on and putting a hat on and going to Amanda and be like, do you think my son will like me like in this? and it was just, you've seen me in the shirt a million times. It's just my Mountain Op shirt and my Yeti hat. Like, it's just what I wear all the time. And all I could remember was like wanting my son to see me how I normally am.
Yeah, that's who you are there. You wanted to see him, you wanted him to see you how you was. Exactly.
Like the first thing that he came to see me when he came out was me,
Yeah.
And Amanda was, thinking the same way. She was getting her stuff together. I had my dad bag together. I mean, I had that dad bag packed for weeks. I mean, that thing was ready, actually probably months ago. And everything was ready. So we get to Loyola out here in Maywood, Illinois, and we walk into the maternity ward there and tell them we think we might be going into labor, or I think my wife might be going into labor. And the nurse, who I'll be honest, this was the only bad nurse we dealt with. She was a little lackluster in getting us into the room. She got us into the room and put the heart rate monitor thing on and was like, I really can't find a heart rate. And that's when Amanda started getting worried. But for me, I kind of saw that nurse's body language and everything. I was like, she's either tired or she's just kind of like doing her own thing. I was like, the doctor will come in, everything will be okay.
So was this a regular appointment for y'all, or did y'all just fill it in and tell them that you was having these contractions?
No, this was we were having the contractions, and we went in, and I after everything's all said and done, I know it was at night. I couldn't tell you what time it was at night because the days bleed together after this. But definitely not, it wasn't a scheduled appointment. It was our due date though, or like our projected due date. So we were kind of on a shotgun at any point. So we got into the room there. She tried to take the heart rate. The nurse couldn't get a heartbeat. And, Amanda was kind of freaking out, and I'm telling her, it's okay. Like we were down this road once or twice before during the tests, and, The more experienced nurse and the doctor was able to come in and get everything figured out. Well, the doctor came in with the ultrasound machine, did the ultrasound, and I remember seeing my son's face up on the screen. And before the doctor even said anything, I knew something was wrong. And I was just like, he's not moving. He's not kicking like he used to. He used to do these barrel rolls. Something's wrong. And the doctor just turned around and he just goes, "I'm so sorry." And when Amanda broke down, I broke down. We were just holding each other. I was so upset, I couldn't even cry tears. And I just remember thinking, how weird is this that I don't even have tears. I'm so shocked and so upset. And all I could think was like, oh my God, my wife, like what's going on with my wife? I stopped thinking about me from that point on for months at that point. But during that time, I'm like, I just like so like they're telling me my son is dead and now my wife has to deliver our son. And that took hours upon hours upon hours and just going through ups and downs and ups and downs. We had to call our family, our families, we were in Maywood, Illinois. So, we had to call our, my wife's family who, from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. So they had a 6.5-hour, 7-hour drive through the middle of the night, knowing that their grandson didn't survive. And, just all these different things going on with all our family. And, everyone got to the hospital. People were in and out. I think honestly, like looking back on it, I think I was in shock the entire time we were in the hospital. So, which was probably a good thing to keep everything together. My wife, the strongest person I have ever known and ever will know, was, she would break down at times, and then she would, she'd kind of wrangle herself back together, and we were just together the whole time. And we never really were apart. If we were, it was because I had to run back to the house to get some stuff. We lived only 5 minutes away. I'd come right back. But we were together. So we knew at least that part was okay. Like we could get through it. And then, like I said before, it was hours upon hours of, induction. It wasn't necessarily hours of labor. My wife delivered Garrett right away. And he was absolutely beautiful. Like he was a handsome kid. And, I just remember thinking like, man, he's got my brother's nose. Like he mustn't have got mine or Amanda's. He got my brother's somehow. And I mean, all jokes aside, like he had the good one,
Yeah.
The nurses took him. They put him in his take home outfit, or his go home outfit, and we just got to hold him for a long time in the hospital. And Amanda and I, we went back and forth. We got to hold him, and before Garrett was born, when I found out like holy shit, I'm going to be a dad, like. I did the Jack from This Is Us thing and got a camera before that episode aired. So I actually did it before he did. I got a good camera because I was like, what, I just want to remember all this. And honestly, I got the camera because I had so many head injuries in hockey that I was afraid I was going to forget stuff. So I was like, I just want it to be as vivid as possible. But I had my camera there, and we let everyone hold Garrett. And there's some amazing pictures of my wife holding Garrett. There's some really good pictures of some of my favorite pictures of me holding Garrett. And all of them are memorable, but I go back and look at the pictures every once in a while, and I see this one picture of my brother holding Garrett. And, he just kind of holds him, and he just holds him right up to his face. And I'll never forget that sight. Him holding him. and just thinking like, man, like, let me take a sec back here.
Yeah, I understand. Just a complete raw emotion.
Oh my God. And like to see it, it affected Amanda and I more than most people will know, unless, and other listeners of the podcast will know. But to see how it affects our families and see what's going on with our families when all this is happening, that one picture puts it into perspective. So,
yeah.
So we got.
I was just going to say, oh yeah, I understand what you mean there, because one thing that I really looked forward to with our son Barron was my sisters and my mom and dad. I'm real close to my grandparents. I'm real close to my nieces and nephews, and I just I know how good of a relationship they would have had with him. So I understand completely what you're talking about there with your brother.
Yeah. And like the hunting theme constantly comes up here. So it's like, it was supposed to be me, my brother, his two sons, and Garrett. Like we were supposed to go down to Texas. We do that annual hog hunt every year. Like there were all these things, all these plans that we had. And that, at that time it all kind of came crashing down. So we did the picture thing, and those are the only pictures we have of Garrett, but those are the ones, like we talk about with some of the other guests. Like we don't have many, but the ones that we have mean more than anything to us. So, the next couple of days become kind of a blur, and this is when I don't know how I got to this point, but between the end of our stay in the hospital and the next week or so afterwards is when it really put into perspective that I have one of the most amazing support systems you'll ever find in family and friends, and through the people that I've met going further, further on, in just complete strangers. And I remember telling people in my family, like when they were having a hard time with it, like I would tell them, you guys have been so strong for me and Amanda, and we will do our best to be as strong as we are for you guys. But the crazy thing is there are people who go through this alone. And it's what got us going at least the first month or so afterwards, where we could say like, we have the support. We have these people. We had people over at the house. It seemed like every day. We had my cousins, Amanda's family came into town. We had our friends, our family. People were just constantly in and out of here. We were never alone. And we really didn't want to be alone. Which is kind of how we ended up with Gracie, our dog. So 2 days after we got home from the hospital, we were just looking at each other and we're saying, we had this plan and we had so much love, like kind of cocked back and ready to give Garrett. And that's changed now. We don't have that anymore. So, Amanda and I had talked about getting a dog for the longest time, and she goes, I want a golden retriever. So I just went online. I found the first breeder we could find, scheduled an appointment to go see him. It was this kind of a scuzzy dude that lived out in Villa Park. Just out of his garage. He had two left. He had a boy and a girl, and we just looked at the girl and we just fell in love with her right off the bat. So we ended up with Gracie, and she's running in and out of the little studio we have here, but she's been a lifesaver for us. And what, we got her, we went down to, Muhlenberg County. We spent some time down there. Did a bunch of fun stuff down in Kentucky. And then we actually took a road trip and just to get away. And again, we were lucky. Where we work and the friends and the support system, what we have, everyone else was taking care of things for us, and we could just focus on us. So we went to Asheville. We went to South Carolina. We visited some family and friends out there, and we just got away for a little while. We were able to escape. We came back. We went back to Kentucky again. We spent a lot of time on the road and just just kind of, if we had it in our mind, we want to do something, we just did it. Because at that point we didn't care. Once we got home, I'm pretty sure we remodeled every room in the house just to change things around quite a bit. I've become a master at hanging chandeliers in our house, because I think I've hung chandeliers in all but maybe 2 rooms of our house now. But that's when once we got home and all the dust had settled, people weren't coming around as much to hang out, because everyone else's life has to continue on. And all the rooms were decorated. That's when the real healing for my wife kind of settled in, and she was okay. She was doing good, and that's when I kind of that's when the shock wore off for me. And there were times in and out of when I was going through, when we were traveling and everything, that I'd have breakdowns, or times where I'm just literally wanted to like swing at the air. But and this is something that I don't think, honestly, I've told anybody, and I saved it for my story with this because I wanted it to be something that people can learn, that it's okay to have these thoughts, but you need to look for help too, or find it in something. That I remember waking up one day and just thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. And after I thought that, I didn't want to have that thought anymore either. So while it was a brief thought, it was a pretty impactful one. So I spent a lot of time training and doing a lot of physical fitness and hunting and stuff. So I decided, I was like, you know what? Here's my plan. If I want to drive myself to the point where I'm gonna kill myself, then I'm gonna do it in the gym, and I'm just gonna keep pushing and pushing and pushing until I can't go anymore. And instead of it being something where I'm gonna take the easy way out, I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna make it as hard as I possibly can. And that single thought is probably what saved my life. Again, I never talked to any therapist. I never even told Amanda about this until, she might hear it on here. But it was a rough time. But once I came to that realization and just followed through with that plan, where I was just going to keep just hammering it out every morning, 4 o'clock, I'm up, I'm going. Things got better, and it was a roller coaster for a little while. The grief never really goes away, but I would just keep pushing on and keep pushing on and keep pushing on. And then I remember when I was really having kind of another dark time, Amanda broke the news to me, and this didn't come without some stress, but broke the news to me that we're expecting our second kid. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I'm good now. That's it. I'm good. And holy shit, did that change stuff up quite a bit. And, we have our own issues with that, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later. But man, like, I remember when my wife told me that, and later on we found out it was a girl. So Evelyn will be here in July. So, as a alpha male extrovert dad, the only thing I could think of is, man, I got to deal with all these guys that are going to come and try to date my daughter. Like, yeah, I'm going to have all the guns out on the counter and do that whole thing. But it's for the most part, and like anybody else will tell you, it seems like a roller coaster that hasn't ended yet.
Hats off, for sharing that, man. I know that that really took a lot for you to share it, especially in this platform. And I just want to, again, hats off to you for, realizing that, you had a couple of options. You could, like you said, that it could eventually cost you your life, and you found something you was passionate about. lifting and hunting, and you sunk all your time into that, to help you heal, and like you said, Gracie, your dog, how much she helps, and I can completely concur with that, because I know our dog and how much she means to us. But again, kind of like you said through my story, that I shared, you just kept sitting there shaking your head yes, and that's what I was doing through all that. Just hats off to you for sharing that, and then overcoming those feelings, because I know those can get really dark at times.
Yeah, it's weird because some of the things that you listen to videos on YouTube when you're working out and stuff, and there's one that says I was sitting in a dark room and all I could think is, what am I going to do now? And I would sit in Garrett's room thinking that same thing, like what am I going to do now? And that led into things like the podcast and the events that I'm going to do, and the kind of the fundraising stuff behind any of that. So but the best part about all of it was meeting guys like you. I mean, Braden, you're the first guy that I met through all this, and have become one of my best friends through it. Joe and Bobby and Brandon, just to name a few of the guys on the other podcasts, but the whole network and all the people that you talk to, they're like, what, I went through this, and you're like, holy shit, you did? I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And it's like they kind of rope you into the club, and you feel way more at home the more people you talk to about it, and the more people you find out went through the same thing.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, now, it took y'all a little while to figure out exactly what happened with Garrett, didn't it?
Yeah, it took kind of administratively, it took a little bit longer than it should have. I guess that might be the euphemistic way of putting it. We the autopsy was done 2 months after Garrett had passed, and all those events took place on October 4th. 2 months after that, so 4 months total, while my wife was having some of her OB appointments, found out that what had taken Garrett was something called an intracranial hemorrhage. And it took a little bit more time to figure out exactly what happened, like how that intracranial hemorrhage had happened. Now, it was something called neonatal alloimmune thrombocytopenia, which is long-term. They use the word NAT or NAT. All the healthcare practitioners are calling it two different things when we see them. So for the most part, it's a lot like the RH or Rhesus syndrome that people are actually tested for. Moms are tested for Rhesus syndrome, which has to do with antibodies and such. But in Rhesus syndrome, it's an antibody response to the blood cells of the baby and what can cause harm to the baby. In NAT, which is what what Amanda and myself and Garrett had, instead of that reaction being to the blood cells, it only affects the platelets. And your platelets are what help with clotting and to stop bleeding. So something caused a bleed in Garrett's brain that because he had this NAT symptom or syndrome or diagnosis, he wasn't able to clot, and that bleed got worse and worse, which is ultimately what took his life. And the stats with that are like 1 in 10,000 babies are affected by that. So it's not something that's screened in the first pregnancy like Rhesus syndrome is. So you're only treated after the fact for your second pregnancy, which my wife is undergoing treatment right now. So then that's got its whole other, can of worms to open up. But the big thing for me, and I guess not to be selfish at all, but you get one gene from your mom, one gene from your dad for everything. And when it comes to your platelets, our Garrett was, instead of being 1A and 1A, he was 1A and 1B, and the 1B part, which came from me, is how, is ultimately what, through a long chain of events, what caused Garrett's demise, which that was a hard one to wrap my head around. And honestly, like, even to this point, I'm still wrapping my head around it. And it's a tough one to to keep in check.
Yeah. Well, man, with, as you said, your wife is, she's pregnant right now. How far along is she?
She's at 22 weeks today. So
wow.
she's and I think this has kind of become my trademark with the podcast, but I mean, my wife's the strongest, and our wives are the toughest people we know.
Yes,
I mean, even in one part I didn't even talk about in the story was the fact that, most people are wheeled out on a wheelchair when they leave the hospital. I'm glad I put explicit warning on these things, but Amanda said, "Fuck that! I'm not going out in a wheelchair." And she walked out after all that. And she, like, the toughest thing I've ever seen anybody do. She walked out of the hospital, and it was emotional. Though, I mean, don't get me wrong, but she walked out to the car after all that, and I was just like, I got no reason to be upset. I got no reason to be, to be sitting here, pissing and moaning. When my wife can do that, I need to buck up, and that inspires me every day.
Well, yeah, like I told you, Lacey, she had to pull me, back on my feet. It's crazy how strong they are.
Oh yeah.
But
they keep us in check.
Yeah, they do. So, with her pregnancy, Kyle, I'm sure there's, some fears that you guys have. You want to talk about them for a minute and, tell us how you're handling that?
Yeah, and honestly, like, up until about 45 minutes ago, we were having another, like, little issue with some contractions that were starting a little early. Luckily enough, everything was okay. But we're so sensitive to every little thing now. And the nice thing is now Amanda is getting the treatment for Nate, which is IVIGG treatment. It's an infusion she has to get once a week for the next 15 weeks. So we had to do a total of 16 weeks. But I mean, every little thing, it's like we have this, like, it's almost like Amanda's surrounded by security everywhere she goes. Everyone at work, my whole family, her whole family, me, and even our dog, we're just super protective of Amanda at any point. And, at first we were super, super scared because we didn't know that Amanda was pregnant. We were worried about, there's a few different, nutrient type things we were worried about and everything. Now we've kind of settled back, like, okay, we take these as they go, one foot in front of the other, like you had talked about before. We're just like, okay, if there's an issue, we handle it, we move forward. The lesson that we kind of learned from all of our situation, both with this Nate thing and everything else, is with healthcare and being a healthcare practitioner. We, luckily enough, we knew the resources to look at. But how we handle any little thing is we drive the conversation with the doctors now. And we say, we went in and we were not candidates for treatment by the algorithm that's set up by throughout all the primary articles that are released. And most of them are in the UK. So not a lot of them are even in the US, which is also why they don't screen the parents for the first birth. But we went in and said, we're not walking out of here until we get treatment. And that's it. And the doctor's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So you'd be surprised.
That's understandable completely, man. I'm sure, like you said, y'all drive the conversation. I'm sure you guys probably had a notebook full of stuff that y'all had, pre-planned to ask the doctor whenever y'all got there.
Oh, yeah. And again, talk about, just being fortunate with us, like being able to, like, we did journal clubs and we did all these different types of things in pharmacy school, and we do them on a daily basis. We look at primary literature. That's our profession. Like, that's our bread and butter. For someone who doesn't, the best thing that I can say is just ask questions. Don't be afraid to question what the doctor's saying, because the doctor doesn't know what the phlebotomist is doing. The phlebotomist doesn't know what the pharmacist is doing. They don't know what each other are doing all the time in healthcare, and their primary focus is not on one patient at a time. So you need to make yourself you need to be the head of that healthcare team. And you would be surprised how willing, especially in maternal and fetal medicine, how willing those doctors are to follow the plan that the parents set up. It was surprisingly easy for us to jump on a treatment, as long as we had the right information and we were well informed. So that's the biggest thing, is just asking around, asking the doctors, asking all the healthcare practitioners you can, maybe staying off of Google.
Yeah.
And just talking to people who know what they're doing and know at least a little bit. And then you can kind of formulate a decision when, if it comes to, a second and third pregnancy. If it's something like Nate, if it's not, that still doesn't mean you can't drive the conversation with the doctor, but you don't have to be meek when it comes to the doctor. Because they have the MD doesn't mean they know everything.
Yeah. Well, man, kind of shifting gears a little here. Let's go back to, you said you was in that, that dark place. And, you said you had to pull yourself out of it, and, Amanda helped pull you out of it. What do you do, Kyle, to, unplug or to, just deal with the pain and the hurt that, you got going on from the loss of Garrett?
Yeah, there's it's like my kind of like the three pillars of stuff that I do, that my three hobbies and interests that, can keep me afloat: hunting, fitness, and, like photography, videography, or like just media in general, which is kind of how the podcast started. But hunting, like right off the bat, there was my wife's uncle, who I just call Uncle Bobby at this point in time. That's Ada in the background, ain't it?
Yeah, it is. I think she heard something outside. That's our little dog.
So, when we were down in Kentucky, shortly after everything happened with Garrett, I had the privilege to go out hunting with Uncle Bobby, who's become like my hunting mentor. Like, he's in the shorter period of time that I've known Bobby, he's taught me so much. We went out one time, and it was right after everything happened with Garrett. I didn't have my camo. I didn't have anything. I went and bought new camo, and he let me use his old Matthews bow. I didn't see anything that day, but I saw something walking around behind me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just kind of let that go. I just like being out in the woods.
Oh yeah.
Second time I went out there, yeah, it's therapeutic. Like, you don't think about anything, whether you're bow hunting or you're just out in the backyard shooting. Like, it's the time you don't think about anything but that, because you can't. You have to be really focused. Second time we went out, I didn't see anything, but again, I was like, you know what? And Bobby felt bad. He's like, I was sure you were going to see something this time. And I didn't care. I was like, okay, it's fine. Like, I just wanted to be out here away from everything else. Third time, Bobby brought the trailer, the ATV. He goes, you are getting a buck today. And we both went up on side-by-side trees, and he didn't even bring his bow out there. He's like, I'm going to kind of spot around for you here. And, start, a little bit before sundown, start creeping in. He goes, this is when it's going to be. No more than 5 minutes after that, this buck comes running in. I mean, like he was like, okay, I'm ready to sacrifice myself at this point. Like, this guy's had a hard enough life. I'm good. And he came running in, and I remember I got so excited. I was like, my heart was pounding. I was just ready to go. And I kind of I was looking, and I see him running in, and there's a tree that he had to pass. And I was like, okay, I can be excited up until he gets to this tree. And then once he passes that tree, it's game time. I cannot get overexcited. I cannot be like, this is my emotional, like, this is the buck I get to harvest because of some divine inspiration. I was like, there's a responsibility now if I'm gonna shoot here. And I was able to slow everything down. It was like Spidey senses kind of kicking in. I got the shot off. You got the thwack. I even got Uncle Bobby even got a little bit of it on video, which was pretty sweet.
So now is this I'm sorry to stop you there, but is this Garrett's buck we're talking about here?
Oh, this is Garrett's buck. Yes, sir. So we, I took the shot. It went through, straight through and through, and we tracked him for a while. And I know Uncle Bobby was really worried. He's like, I don't know how, that shot was a little far back. I don't know if we're going to find him. We kept finding little blood here or there. And he was showing me like how to, at the time, he's still teaching me. He's freaking out, but he's still teaching me, how to track, using toilet paper to mark these different things and making sure, that because that's biodegradable, it goes away. And, we're walking around for about an hour and he goes, we were looking downhill. He goes, I bet you he's down he went towards water. So we walked down towards the water and sure enough, the Gasper River stopped that buck in its trails. And we had to fish the buck out of the Gasper River with an ATV. I was like, I've watched a ton of hunting shows and I'm pretty sure I've never seen that. And Uncle Bobby was all worried. He's like, I'm thinking, I don't know how we're going to get into the water. I just dove right into the water to go get the buck. I didn't I was like, I've been through enough. I don't care anymore. Like, I'm just going to go get him. And I literally swam to get my buck out of a river. And luckily enough, I'll pick him up, not this week, but next week. The taxidermist is all done with him. So I've got him mounted and we're going to put him downstairs down in the kind of my man cave that Amanda's designed for me. So it was one of the first things that was kind of one of the first big positive things that really happened for me afterwards.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And it's funny because that actually happened before you and I got connected. But I think that Lacey and Amanda, they had already, spoke some, and I guess she might have seen that on social media somewhere, Instagram or Facebook, and she was like, "Man, that's awesome, Kyle. He killed a nice buck." And I think you had it on there that it was Garrett's buck. So this is actually the first time I've got to hear the story. You might have told me a little bit about it, back and forth through text messages, but it was exciting for me to get to finally hear the story, the full story.
Yeah. And I remember kind of telling you, and I think you got a buck shortly after I did, like a little bit later on in the season too. So it was like, there were a lot of parallelisms with you and I that were going on, which was real cool. And I can't tell you how much that helped me, man. Cause there were some times where I had to reach out to you and be like, dude, I'm not doing well right now. I'm just going to lay it out for you. Like, it's just kind of the personality I am where it's like, I'll just be out with it. And it was cool with someone like I didn't even, someone I didn't know before any of this stuff happened, where it was like, it's okay. Like you'd be like, it's cool, man. It's okay.
Yeah, man. And I'm sure you had the same feelings I did. I know, every time I was out and still, even turkey hunting now in the spring, every time I'm out in the woods, hunting, hiking, anything that I do out there, I'm always imagining, which he is with me, but, I'm imagining Baron, with me, and I'm sure you was doing the same with Garrett, hence the name, for the deer, Garrett's buck.
Yeah, exactly. And, and with, going out and hunting and hiking and everything, it is great to unwind there. And, the other thing that I get to do is, like I'm addicted to working out and mostly to compete. And where I get myself into trouble though is like, I tell myself, if I work out so hard, my son will be back home when I get home. And that's where I get it. Things get a little on edge for me there. But, the other part of kind of my recovery or, how I kind of deal with things is through fitness and is through training for all these, just what people will probably call just absolutely crazy events. But these are the things that kind of get me through it, And
man, give us a little, just a little information, a little rundown about some of the events you're going to be doing.
So this year,
but maybe the listeners probably want to hear them.
Yeah. So this year I'm doing what's called the Train to Hunt event. And I did the Chicago Triathlon last year, which was just the most fun anybody could ever have. So if you ever get a chance to do one, whether it be Chicago or not, I definitely encourage it. The Train to Hunt is a lot like a hunter triathlon. It involves, sandbag movements and archery shooting, a 3D course, a mile run with a 50-pound pack on your back. It's like I said, people call me crazy for doing it, but I love it. I absolutely love it. Just doing the training for that. The other thing that I'm doing is the Chicago Marathon. Now, my wife did it, I think it was 2 years ago now, and that's how I started competing, because I saw my wife do the marathon. I was like, I can't. I'm so competitive even with my wife, so I have to go and I have to do these things just to compete with her. And so this year I'll be running the Chicago Marathon. I'm actually running for Illinois Spina Bifida Association. And honestly, I chose that charity because they help kids who made it past birth, but aren't really able to enjoy the things that I'm able to enjoy. I get to go out and climb up a tree, shoot a deer, go to the gym at 4 a.m, get up, do everything on my own. These kids don't really get that opportunity. And through the Illinois Spina Bifida Association, they do everything they can to make it possible for these kids to do as much as they possibly can. And a lot of that's through adaptive athletes, who I have the most admiration for beyond almost anything else. So it's really cool to be able to run for that charity and just, and help support them. And if listeners of the podcast want to help with that, we'll put it on the website too, where they can support the charity, which would be really cool. But I'm running for that charity, and I'm running for my son Garrett. It's the date of the run is, or the marathon is the 6th of October. We lost Garrett on the 4th of October, and this will be the 1-year anniversary. So I'll be rocking the light blue and pink somehow or another. Hopefully I'll have my tattoo by then, but we'll see how that works out.
That's awesome.
It's getting pretty elaborate in design. But I'm raising money for that charity, but I'm running it for my son. And it's such a surreal experience to know that I'll get to run that for Garrett, and then I'll get to meet, my wife and my daughter at the finish line when I'm done. And I'll tell you, after all that, I'm going to be an emotional mess. So I don't think there'll be any really good pictures of that, but I just it's going to be 26.2 miles to get to them, running it for my son. And I can only imagine the endorphins and everything they're going to kick in. So, but after that, who knows after that? I've talked to, my previous boxing coach about doing some jiu-jitsu competition and things like that. But it just, all I know is it's just going to get crazier from here. It's just going to drive my wife even more nuts.
Well, this is actually a good transition point. I didn't know you very much, Kyle, before, we got connected, through our unfortunate situations. I think you said it in one of your podcasts that it's a club that nobody wants to be a member in. And you're right. It really is. It's a brotherhood, really, of dads, just wanting to help each other out. But, I didn't know you much before. So tell us a little bit, about Kyle before everything that happened with Garrett, and Kyle now after everything has happened.
Yeah. And I thought about this question for some time, and I think the best example of this is the Kyle before. Let's take a step back. I'm a podcast addict by design, I guess. And there's a gentleman who does a podcast called the Jocko Podcast. And I heard about this book called Extreme Ownership. And using this book, and I tried to make my life, I tried to improve myself, and try to improve myself both as, as a person and as a leader. The Kyle before read that book, and, I'd take ownership of things that went right and things that went wrong. But the things that went wrong would just absolutely just make me crumble and just destroy me. And I wasn't able to ever figure out like a solution to the problem or able to stoically handle the problem as a leader. And then I walked through hell and I came out on the other end, and I was scathed, but my wife and I both came out on the other end. I went back and I listened to that book on tape again. And now when something goes right or something goes wrong and I take ownership of it, particularly the things that go wrong, there's a solution. And I'm able to take a step back and say, this is what we need to do, and be more of a stoic figure, whether it be at work, mostly in my relationship with my wife. I don't think there's a day that goes by that we don't thank our lucky stars for each other. I thank my lucky stars for her every night, because this has never weakened our relationship. It's only strengthened it. And there's times when, especially with all this Nate stuff that's going on now, where I have to take a step back and say, this is what we're going to do. And there's times now where she's taken a page out of my book and then she takes charge. So it's like that pay it forward type of thing. So if you act in a stoic nature, then those around you will act the same. And that's been the biggest difference that I've noticed so far, is that I guess I kind of joke with people at work sometimes, and they say, oh my God, this is terrible. It's something that goes awry at work. And I just turn to them and I go, I've been through worse. And
Yeah.
We laugh about it a little bit, but then they kind of know, like, well, yeah, holy shit, he has. So I think we're going to be okay. So it's helped both in my professional life and my personal life.
Great. Well, man, this podcast, I know it's got to mean a lot to you, man. Can you kind of tell us, like, a little bit about the beginnings of this, how you come up with the idea of it, and then, what are some of the future plans that you foresee for it? And then, tell us what it means to you, man. I know it's got to mean a great deal to you.
Yeah. We'll start with its beginnings, and then I'll kind of go from there. I actually started, so my friend Jeremy, he's a big production guy, video, audio, photography. He did our maternity pictures, and is one of my best friends to this day. He has a company called Exit 19 Productions. And I bounced the idea off of him of doing a video, just a YouTube video. I wanted to share what I did to help me recover with other people. I even had a title for it. It was called Lost and Found. And I was just kind of like, I was recording and videoing myself, like just regular, the day-to-day at the gym. I was going to try to do some hunting videos. And when I set up the computer and everything to do the voiceovers at my little studio, like our little back room or studio here, I looked at it, and then I just took a picture on my phone, and I said, I think I'm going to start getting into podcasting. Completely threw the video aside for the time being. I mean, who knows if I can ever really get that thing together or not. But I shared it on social media, and I had a bunch of people say, like, that's pretty cool. Are you really going to start a podcast? And I'm like, oh shit, now I really got to start a podcast. So, and I joke about it, but that's kind of how, like, the idea started, where it's just like, I just decided one day I like listening to podcasts. I've listened to enough to know kind of how you could do it. Watch enough YouTube videos, and you start to realize how easy it actually is. So if anybody's thinking about doing it, I mean, all you need is a hosting site, a recording device of some kind. And if you're doing it remotely, you can use things like this, Zencaster or something with Skype, and you're good to go. Luckily enough, I had a friend from pharmacy school who actually started his own bow hunting podcast, only a month or two before I decided I was going to start. It's called Bow Hunters Chronicles. Adam Miller, he's the host with his buddy John. And so I could bounce some ideas off of him too. And then I talked to Jeremy, and he kind of showed me how creative projects can be really organic, and just kind of how things can kind of flow to whatever you want them to be. And through that, Dads and Angels was born. And it's pretty cool. And I keep saying, I'm going to put this up on the website, the different logos that we've had so far. I've always tried to incorporate kind of like a manliness to it, but I think we've stuck with the angel wings with the Cryptek camo at this point. And the camo, we've talked about it enough on the podcast with the hunting that should be obvious, but it's such a, just a masculine logo, and things are just starting to kind of fall into place with the podcast now. And it was a vehicle for me to be able to get the story of all these different dads out there, because everyone's got a different story. Everyone has, I think, the same reaction when they're told they've lost their child, but their story before and after are so different, and how they handle things. And so getting those stories out there, I felt was really important. And the most important part of it was how they got through it and what they're doing right now. So, I mean, we've had guys who have been recovering alcoholics. Braden, you've had your stuff in the past, and you could have easily just reverted back, but you didn't. And it shows how much strength people have when they go through something like this, to not revert back to the person that they were, but only to come out stronger.
Yeah, and I think guys, listening to it, going through similar situations as us, and maybe having, a history like that with, addiction, alcoholism, depression, I think, they'll listen to that and be like, man, this guy made it, he's doing okay. That'll give them hope, and, give them a little motivation, and strength to get through what they're going through.
Yeah. And it's the strength and motivation to get through everything, but sometimes it's finding the thing that will get you through it as well. And everyone's, I'd like to think everyone's going to be as strong as they can for their wives. Some people aren't able to do it, or some people, their relationships don't work out that way. And, I guess my plans for the future are to bring people on who maybe it didn't work out so well. I've got one guy that we're hoping to have come on who's lost his faith, who said, I no longer believe in God because of this. He can't be the only guy to think that. So that's why I want to bring him on. And I want people to know that, if you've lost your faith a little bit, it's okay. Like this guy did, and there's got to be other guys. And then going forward from there, I guess I call this kind of a phase 2 for the podcast, is what I talked about before. I have the 3 pillars of things that, I like to do that really just kind of help me disconnect. It's the media, it's hunting, and it's physical fitness, and, some type of mixed martial arts in some way, shape, or form. I've got Adam Miller and Brandon Lee from Chase and Chance TV, that are going to come back on and talk about how to get started with hunting and archery and bow hunting, and just how to get started. So no intimidation, nothing else, but these are the things that you need to get started.
So basically what you're doing is you're maybe somebody that is going through something like this, you're giving them maybe like a tool that they could possibly use, to help them recover from this.
Exactly. It's like, these are what helped me. And it's like one of those, I want them to help you. If I could have started a podcast that was all about these things, I would have. But I guess I needed the why behind it. And that's what I was searching for a long time, even before any of this happened in October. Is, I've always wanted to do something like this, but I needed that why. And now it's like, well, the why is to get through such a hard time. And what better way than to share the things that helped me with other dads, and maybe it gets them started. And if not, maybe there's some transferable skills that kind of get them into something else. Just say I don't know anything about, such and such type of activity. I'm just going to go out and do it. What do I have to lose? I've been through hell. Like Kyle said, I've been through hell. I walked out the other side. I'm a little bit scathed, but I'm okay. And I can do this. I mean, the other two things that I'm going to, Jeremy from Exit 19 Productions has agreed to come on and kind of talk about how to get started with, camera stuff, video stuff, if people are interested in that. And then, my previous boxing coach, Chris Nicholson, he's a current professional MMA fighter, and he's going to come on, and he's a real interesting individual. And if people can stand his voice for a little while, like, he's going to talk about like how to the right way to get into fitness, where they can look up gyms and how to get it, whether it be just like the weightlifting type fitness, or if it be like actual like combat fitness. Like, this guy's been through it all, so he can tell you all that. But how to get started, like getting over that hump of getting started and getting into something like this so that you can recover from something like the loss of a child, like, I think is such an important driver for phase 2 that, I'm like, I guess I'm desperately excited about it because I want it to work for so many people.
Yeah. And man, I know it's got to be working because, like you said, maybe giving them examples of some tools they could use, or even having somebody on. I know how much it helped me, coming on the podcast and sharing my story. Because I'm not a very big talker, that from talking to me on the phone and through text messages, but I can't speak to how much it helped me, and even coming back on and doing this one, it's helped me again. So I think your message is getting out there, just from an outside perspective, somebody looking in. I really do think your message is getting out there.
I certainly hope so, and I often wondered what it was going to be like to be on the other side of the mic here and be able to tell my story. And I got choked up, and, you listen back and you're going to hear me kind of pause and get choked up. And there's some times where I really struggled through it, but honestly, I do feel it's nice to get their perspective of what a guest feels like on this show, because it's a very refreshing feeling to, we're getting to the close of the show here now. And I'm like, okay, I got Garrett's story out there now. Like, now people kind of know the why of the podcast too. So, let's see what kind of positivity happens from here. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. Well, in closing, Kyle, I got one more question for you. What is some advice or some words of inspiration that you would, you'd give to a grieving dad out there that may be having a hard time right now?
I guess it's kind of twofold. Internally, and honestly, most importantly for, I guess, self-preservation, if you think you need help, you do. Just ask. And don't be afraid to ask anybody around you, because even the people that you don't think would ever lift a finger will help you in the time of desperation. The second part, which is more of a longitudinal thing, is, and I learned this from reading stuff about the actor Keanu Reeves, who had went through a similar thing that, Braden, you and I had gone through. The grief never really ends. It just changes. And be prepared for it to be a positive change at times, but that doesn't mean there can't be negative turns to it as well. But you just have to keep discipline when it comes to your grief and keep it in check, but know that it's always there, and you're going to be okay, and you're not alone. Because once you've gone through something like this, you are a stronger, better person. And if you keep reminding yourself of that, and that makes all the difference when you're facing that grief head on, even if it's on a day, it's going to be on a day-to-day basis. You're going to wake up. There's not a day that goes by that I don't say, okay, my son's dead. How am I going to handle this day? And I do it. I'm still here. And I've been through a dark place where I could not have potentially been here doing this podcast at this point. But the grief comes and goes. It's going to be positive. It's going to be negative, but it is always going to be there. And it's just how you handle it. And it's what you do to unwind, and what you do to, what you do to distract yourself at times, or what you do to take it head on. That's up to you.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, it's been fun, man. Once again, I want to thank you for allowing me to, be a part of this episode. And right quick before we close, how can people get a hold of you? Social media. Where can they listen to this podcast and find this podcast?
Yeah, the podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, dadsandangels.com. We have a brand new website hosted through Squarespace. There's several different contact information. There's tons of contact information on that website. Dads and Angels podcast at gmail.com. You can look me up, Kyle Mork, on Facebook through the Facebook page. There's a lot of different modalities to get a hold of me. So, for dads especially, and wives of dads who they think their husbands or their partners need some help, I'm 24/7. The same thing I tell my family and my students. I am 24/7 when it comes down to stuff like this. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. As soon as I see the message, you'll get a response from me of some kind. So, and I look forward to hearing not just the need for help, but this inspiring story. So if other people want to be on the podcast, definitely send me your story. If you ever thought there's no way I could be on a podcast, send me a message. We'll get you on the podcast. And then you can say, I'm on iTunes right now. I think that's the coolest thing.
Yeah. I think if I can do 2 of them, anybody can get through these. Well, guys, thanks again for listening to the Dads and Angels podcast. I was your host tonight, Braden Galyen, and we're signing off.
Bye-bye.